everybody. I know you're just getting started with your salads here in the room, and your entrees are about to come, but I think it is time to get the show started, particularly for our folks on Zoom over here. It's something I did not get to do very much in person when I was president of this club about a year and a half ago, but I get to convene the meeting by actually hitting a real bell. Thank you very much. And welcome to the 5,625th meeting of the Rotary Club of Chicago. I'm standing in for our President Reebok today. He had a family emergency to contend with, so I am stepping in. And to get us started today, I'd like to introduce our president nominee, Sarah Buck, who's going to come up and tell us the thought for the day.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay. So I am Sarah Buck, and I am also the co-chair of the Community Service Committee, and I am here to present a thought of the day. Today happens to be my parents' 53rd wedding anniversary.
Wow.
That's it, I'm done. No. Thanks for having me. Before they retired and were able to play golf in the middle of a Tuesday, which they're doing right now, my mother built the 8-wheeler roller rink from gravel to a viable business sold nearly 40 years later. She did this in 1973, when it was not common for women to do these things. She came home one evening and told my dad, "I'm building a skating rink." I don't know what he was actually thinking at the time, but his response was, "All right." She levied her connections from working at the local radio station, networking before the term was popular. She hired contractors, she procured all the loans from the bank, she solicited shareholders, she hired employees and learned how to do payroll, plus all the day-to-day management things, such as ordering concession items or new music, the latter of which I eventually took over. She navigated serious problems, such as a major screw-up when laying down a new skating surface that resulted in the need for a complete redo. Their opening day was April 13th, 1974, and they retired in 2013, although with taxes and transfer of sale duties, they really retired in 2014. One of the more astounding things, of which there are many, is that my mother kept the same salary across the 40 years, choosing not to take a raise. I am the first person in my immediate family to be a Rotarian. But when I think about the rink and what my parents did for our community of Jacksonville, Illinois, it is easy to link the 4-way test to their guiding principles. First, is it the truth? My parents ran an honest business, which is obvious based on its longevity. Second, is it fair to all concerned? For one example, the rink's prices were always in line with what my blue-collar, middle-class town could afford. Sometimes kids would come to the window and pay with an assortment of coins that must have come from a piggy bank. Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? This one's easy. There are countless stories of friendships built at the rink, a few marriages, probably a few divorces. As a form of marketing, my mother gave free passes to all of the schools. Additionally, each school had a school skate each month, where half of admissions would go back to the schools, and the last school skate of the year marked 100% of admissions back to the school. Still today, they get recognized and acknowledged at places like the grocery store. And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Ask anyone, including myself, around during those 40 years about the 8-wheeler roller rink, and you'll see them get wistful and gush about how much they loved it there, or they met their so-and-so there, or I remember when this, that, or the other happened there, whatever. So please, join me in raising a glass to my parents on their anniversary as two people who depict all the things that Rotary stands for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. As somebody who started his own small business and was slightly paranoid at the risk, I only had to invest in a laptop and a cell phone for what I do. So I can't even imagine what your parents had to contend with from a risk perspective. So one quick announcement before we introduce our guest for today. I think you all should have received a survey via email, a Rotary One survey via email. It should also be in the gyrator. Please click on that. Please answer the survey. It's a very short survey, but it is very helpful for understanding our progress on the strategic plan that we have for our club and how to make sure that we continue to adjust and adapt to make sure that we're doing the right things to add value to all of your lives through our club. The deadline for that is next week. For those who are on Zoom, I believe Shelby will be dropping the link into the chat. So as we begin our program, as always, we'll take questions at the end from the room as well as folks online through the chat box. I do not have a laptop at the lectern, so I am going to rely on folks from CAM to read questions for me off of the Zoom chat when we get to that point. So let's begin with the introduction of our speaker. Shelby, I believe we have a slide here. Very good, very good. So I'm going to start my introduction of today's speaker with a question. How many of you know what movie these pictures are from? Very good, thank you. And if you didn't know that, you can no longer be a member of this club or a citizen of the city of Chicago, I think. Being a born and bred Chicagoan, Blues Brothers was required viewing. I'm sure anybody in my high school could recite all the most famous lines. And the climax of the movie, and in fact, really the entire plot revolves around needing to pay a delinquent tax bill to save an orphanage that they grew up in. And after they get the cash, they race with half of CPD, the Illinois State Police, and the Illinois National Guard chasing after them. They race to, and I can't even get myself to say this without mustering up my thickest Chicago accent, the Cook County Assessor's office. Now, just out of curiosity, how many people know who played the clerk? That is a young Steven Spielberg. Yeah, interesting, right? It's a total side note, really nothing to do with our program. And also, for what it's worth, the kind of convergence of multiple worlds here. On Friday, I'm actually going to see Dan Aykroyd and James Belushi, who's the closest thing we have to, I guess, a real Belushi, perform as the Blues Brothers down at the old Joliet prison. So I feel like Mr. Assessor, if you were there, the universe might explode or something. So anyway, Fritz Kaegi, as I think you know, and while you're all here, is serving his first term as Cook County Assessor. And he'll be the first to tell you that you don't go to the assessor's office to actually pay your tax bill. When I was president, I had Mr. Kaegi speak. That was 2 years ago. He told us about what the assessor does do and some of those misconceptions. I was excited to hear about his plans for reforming the system, focused on operational changes, technological upgrades, and of course, the elimination of favoritism. So now here we are 2 years later, and the assessor and I thought it would be great to hear about how that's gone. What are the successes and what are the challenges remaining? So a little background about the assessor. Prior to beginning his career at Cook County government, Fritz spent more than 20 years valuing assets as a mutual fund portfolio manager and analyst. He holds the Chartered Financial Analyst and Certified Illinois Assessment Officer designations. He is also a member of the International Association of Assessing Officers. In 2020, Fritz received the A. Philip Randolph Change Agent Award, and in 2021, the Adlai Stevenson Award for Public Service. Now, though Fritz currently lives in Oak Park, he was born and raised in Hyde Park. He did his undergraduate studies at Haverford and received his MBA from Stanford University. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce in person, this time, Mr. Fritz Kaegi.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Sarah. It's such a delight to be here in this historic club, Club Number One. I don't know if I can quite be Steven Spielberg for you, but I'll do my best, guys. Rotary really is it all got started here in Chicago, and it sort of represented, how you have spread your organization, and really what it represents is fellowship and social capital, and it's spread around the world. I've been to, my old job, as Eric mentioned, I did international investing. I've sat at Rotary chapters around the world in other countries and all over the United States, and it's pretty amazing that it got started here. And we're doing this event today in person, thank goodness. We've broken free from Zoom, although hello to everyone out there in Zoom. Glad to have you here, but it's wonderful to be here with you in person here at the Union League Club. Also a really important part of Chicago's history. And Union League Club was founded to fight corruption and build a better Chicago. So we have two great organizations, example of social capital, people coming together to improve where we live. And this is why I love my job. So let me tell you a little bit more about, what we've been working on. I have my speech up here. Okay, this is I had another draft that I printed out, but okay, thank you. Just want to make sure I'm working off my most current version here. Great. Yes. Thank you. Perfect. So, when we last met 2 years ago, early in the pandemic, and we've gone through what seems like 20 years of changes in that time. And I'm really grateful that, we're here in person, just exchanging stories. I have one of my classmates from business school here, Shani Harmon, and so many other people that I know. It's good to actually see you in person. Like the other agencies and governments and other organizations, the assessor's office pivoted to remote work as we executed on our vision of reform. And just in the past year since we've spoken, we've achieved quite a lot. And I'd just like to tell you something about that before we look to the future. The International Association of Assessing Officers verified what preliminary data had already shown, that our assessments are fairer and more accurate than they were under the past administration or ever before. So this is really the first most notable achievement that has been demonstrated in the last year. Second, through new legislation and technology, we've made it easier than ever for seniors and veterans and people with disabilities to get the exemptions that they deserve. Third, through really generational technology upgrade, we've dramatically improved transparency and put out more data than ever before, and there's more feature improvements to come that we're really proud of. Fourth, we're now winning awards from peers and experts in our industry. We'll tell you about some of them today, and we have a lot more coming that we can't tell you about today, but we're really excited about them. And then in the last year, the market is making it increasingly clear that transparency works. We've seen new valuation records established through many different parts of the real estate industry and many different real estate sectors. Over 20 cranes are turning now in Chicago alone, almost all of them outside of the loop, by the way. And money is flowing in from institutional investors around the world that had previously avoided Chicago. So we're really proud of this. When I came into office 4 years ago, this was not a vision that most people could have imagined. That an assessment system that's accurate and supports the most vulnerable and is held up for praise instead of held out for scorn and embarrassment. This is something that it's hard to imagine, but we're here. In the past 3.5 years, we've rebuilt our office's infrastructure in 4 key areas: high quality data, well-trained staff, technological modernization, and professional operations. Basically, it's been a gut rehab, but now we're really reaping rewards from that work. We recently received proof that our efforts were paying off. The IAAO, which is our industry's gold standard, released an independent study that said that the 2019 initial assessments from my office met their standards for fairness and equity. And just think about that. Only 2 years after the Tribune's blockbuster 2017 Tax Divide series, which outlined the myriad problems in our assessment system under previous leadership, we achieved and delivered on the benchmarks for accuracy and uniformity in assessments. We're really proud of that. All of this culminated in what's arguably the most important thing that we do. We call it the Nerd Super Bowl. The 2021 reassessment of Chicago, it contains more than half of the county's parcels. All of the investments that we made in people, process, talent, technology came to bear as we released assessments and heard appeals for Chicago's 77 community areas, nearly 900,000 parcels, totaling hundreds of billions of dollars in market value. And last spring, we released the final results of that assessment, and it reflects 3 years of growth in Chicago's real estate market. It corrects the problems of the past, and it contains really good news for most property owners. If you're a homeowner, someone who owns a single-family residence, a condo, or 2 to 6 flat apartment building, your share of Chicago's assessed value dropped 9 percentage points from 2018. Now, 9 percentage points of the tax base. What does that mean? Here's the thing to remember. Somewhere between $7.25 to $7.5 billion in property taxes are levied on Chicagoans this year by all the different taxing bodies, the Chicago Public Schools, Chicago itself, the county. 9 percentage points of that is about $650 million a year. $650 million a year potentially staying with several 100,000 homeowners who live in Chicago's neighborhoods. And a reduction in homeowners' share of assessed value will contribute to reductions in residents' share of property taxes. Now, the final tally comes with the tax bills that are sent out later this year. Now, remember, there are many factors in those tax bills that our office does not control. Levies by taxing bodies, so that's the Chicago Public Schools and the city. Exemptions and TIFs affect the rates that are applied to those to assess values. But you know what also affects rates? Appeals decisions by the Cook County Board of Review. This is a process that's underway now and will continue for the next few months, and it needs scrutiny because we're not the last word on it. They are. Data from the past 2 reassessment cycles shows that the Board of Review has often reversed the corrections that we've made to previous lowball assessments of large commercial properties. So just to put a finer point on it, there were assessment value gaps on commercial properties of 40 to 50% in many parts of Cook County when we came into office. We have narrowed that gap, but the gap gets widened on appeal at the Board of Review. And the givebacks are really lopsided. The Board of Review gave back $2.2 billion in assessed value for commercial properties in 2020, only about $200 million for residential. That's 11 to 1. That makes the system more lopsided and it reverses the progress that we've made. So in 2020, commercial reductions by the Board of Review were so large, they even increased the residential tax burden in some South suburban communities. Now, we've been closing that assessment gap between residential and commercial, but as I mentioned, the Board of Review has continued to widen it, and it's taken back a large part of the progress that the public has demanded and earned. Here's one way to think about it, just to put a finer point. I know some of you have been following the news. Much ink has been spilled recently about the city's proposed $42 million levy increase. Have you guys heard the reporting on this? There's a lot of hyperventilating about that, even though it's actually relatively modest and less than what was planned. But 42 million, that's what's generated all this coverage. But by comparison, the potential of Board of Review givebacks to large commercial property owners could have a much larger and even devastating impact on homeowners. Every percentage point of tax burden that's put back on homeowners is an additional 70 million increase for homeowners. So almost twice as large as that proposed city increase for just 1 percentage point of burden. And remember, with the reassessment we've completed, we've reduced homeowners' share of the burden by 9 percentage points. So there's a lot at stake here. I remain committed to collaborating and cooperating with the Board of Review to reform the broken property tax system. I'm really heartened by the words of the 2 potential incoming Board of Review commissioners, who just won their primaries and who've committed themselves to more technology cooperation, to transparency, to fairness, and to higher ethical standards. This is good. I also believe the property tax working group convened by President Preckwinkle will yield a set of best practices for our office and the board review. In the end, these guidelines will create more certainty and predictability in assessments around the county. For our part, for the last 3 years, we've increased the transparency of both our numbers and our methodologies. We recently released all 2021 reassessment information organized in a set of data dashboards on our website. Something they've not been done before. It's more than what other assessors in the rest of the country do. And this year, we took transparency a step further for commercial property owners. On our website, we published all the data that we use to calculate the assessment of every single individual commercial property in Chicago, more than 60,000 parcels. And we're now doing the same thing as we reassess the north suburbs this year. So you can see, pick any commercial property in Chicago, you can go in and see how we came up with the numbers. That's not been done before. We don't know any other assessor's office in the country that does this. And we'll put even more of our office's data and property information online this year with the launch of a whole new data portal. Making this data public will reduce the number of FOIA requests and improve operations overall. And we're setting a good example for our partners at the board review. We have a lot of big plans coming up for the next 4 years. One focus will be on expanding access to property tax saving exemptions. This is the amount of value that every homeowner gets to take off of the assessed value of their home if they qualify. We've had great success with our exemption auto renewal program, which has made it easier than ever for seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities to receive the property tax exemptions they deserve. Before we came into office, if you were a senior, you had to recertify every year that you were still over 65. Isn't that crazy? My mom, before she died, she said, "Fritz, I don't pay much attention to finances, but that seems pretty crazy." And the reason why was the General Assembly thought we didn't have the technology to keep track of who moved or who was still alive. We showed them we could because of the tech work that we did. We got that passed. So now, in the first year of our exemption auto renewal program, we gave 32,000 more eligible seniors property tax exemptions than in the year before. That's 32,000 people who didn't have to brave the hawk in the middle of winter just to get the lower property taxes they're entitled to. It saves countless hours of time and trouble for people who need it. We've also identified 30,000 homeowners who we had reason to believe were no longer eligible for an exemption and asked them to reapply, which kept tax rates down for everyone else. Our plan is to continue to find thousands of newly eligible homeowners who are eligible for exemptions and ensure they know about this benefit. About a third of homeowners don't have the homeowner's exemption. That's like over 300,000 homes. We plan to partner with organizations like Rotary and increase our use of technology to mail new applications to seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans, and then use that same information to allow for the auto renewal of those exemptions each year. And we think there's a lot that we can do. We think this is some of the lowest hanging fruit that we see for making some further improvements to the system. Amid our great steps forward on a more equitable system, we've gotten recognition from our peers in the industry for the first time. Our office was not winning awards before we came into this office. In 2021, we received awards for our digital innovation and communication efforts. In this year, I'm proud to announce that we won 3 awards from the National Association of Counties for 1, making assessments more accurate and fair, 2, for our senior exemption auto renewal program, and 3, for our online outreach efforts. And under previous leadership, the assessor's office, as I mentioned, it wasn't winning these awards, and if anything, it was held up for ridicule. Among the many other things we've improved, I'm proud to say we've upgraded our national reputation too. We're going to be announcing some really big awards that will be coming our way in the next few weeks. And I'm proud to say that we're working with the largest assessment offices in America to lead a national initiative around the improvement of residential property data around the country. This is how we can take all the things that are happening in big data in the world of technology and make them better for homeowners, not only here, but everywhere in America. We've been in fruitful discussions with the White House and federal regulators about accessing appraisal data that would give offices like ours access to data on the quality and conditions of homes. What's going on inside a home? Is it a Martha Stewart kitchen, or is it something that hasn't been touched since Bess Truman was in the White House? We had a Bess Truman kitchen at my house growing up. God bless my parents saving money with that. But you know, the ones next door, they have that that Martha Stewart kitchen. Otherwise identical house. Guess which one might sell for one more than the other? And we wouldn't want to extrapolate from one to the other without adjusting for that quality. But that's what this data will allow us to do. You know, and this data will reduce the potential for overassessment of lower value homes. It'll make our systems less regressive. These are also traditionally the homes that are least likely to appeal. Fixing this problem will be a giant leap forward in fairness and equity, and we hope to have some news for you on this coming up soon. As we expand our access to data sources and expand our use of technology, it's possible we could see a day in the near future when we're able to reassess all county properties annually rather than 1/3 of the market every year. You know, our peers in New York City, Maricopa County in Arizona, they're of comparable size to our jurisdiction. They do the whole county every year. We think we can get to that point with further improvements in staffing and technology and data. You know, assessments should be a mirror to the market. So when assessments are a couple of years out of date, that distorts the system. We want to make it better. So assessing more frequently would mean that we're following the market more closely and more accurately. You know, as we continue to improve our accuracy, we're improving customer service too. We've expanded our online and in-person outreach and plan for improvements to our service by phone to reduce wait times. This is something that's a personal priority for me. And I've taken bold action so that we can leave the dysfunction of the past behind for good. We've created an office that Chicagoans and people in the suburbs can be proud of. It's one that they demanded. Our office is no longer thought of as a black box that can only be understood by a select few. And you no longer need to know a guy to get a fair deal from the assessor's office. And I can assure you, knowing a guy will get you nowhere with me. So the thing that we're really proud of is that the market is responding to this. They like this. Transparency works. You know, there's nothing that makes investors from around the world, from places like Germany, but also from the rest of America who haven't been familiar with all of the idiosyncrasies of Cook County and Chicago, nothing that would scare them away more than thinking that you have to hire a politician to navigate this system as a property tax appeal lawyer, for example. The transparency that we're bringing is bringing new money, new investment here, and it's working. You know, because so much of our office is enshrined in the property tax code, the best way for us to make these changes permanent is to make them part of state legislation. This transparency that we're doing as a policy, we want to make this part of law. We want to enshrine this in the law. So we're going to continue to look for opportunities to do that, to enshrine transparency in the property tax code, transparency obligations for us and for the board review and for other venues. Our office has enormous reach. We touch every single one of 1.9 million properties in Cook County and the people who live in them and around them. With that reach comes an enormous responsibility, one that's based in ethics, fairness, and transparency. And it's a responsibility I don't take lightly, and I'm really proud to shoulder, and I'm proud to be sharing with you here today. So with that, why don't we take some questions and we start our discussion. Eric?
Okay, do we have a microphone? We have a microphone in the room here. I don't know if we can get somebody to help. Tamara, could you help pass around the microphone? I think we have I think Brian has a question up here. While you're passing the microphone, I'm going to take the chair's prerogative and ask a question myself, which is, how closely does our system here mirror that in other cities? And I mean just sort of this assessor's office and a board of review and kind of how that whole process and interplay works? Is that a pretty common structure?
Great question, Eric. The way property taxes work across America is an incredible hodgepodge. You have 50 different states, which sort of create the property tax codes for every state, and every state they're pretty different. And then the operations of different assessors' offices and review boards and all these other places has further differences. There are some notable differences here. Actually, our system, in its basic structure, is pretty good. That our assessments are a mirror to the market, and there are no caps on assessments. You see caps on assessments in places like California, where once you buy something, the assessment, it can't really change over time. Now, some people think that's really fair, but it's created an affordable housing nightmare in California. There is, try renting out an apartment for $5,000 in Silicon Valley or LA. And the burdens are stacked on people who are new homeowners and new creators of businesses, while the benefits are passed on to people who might have already realized huge gains on their property. My aunt, she bought a home in a really nice neighborhood of LA back when a high school math teacher could. But since then, her home's zoomed up in value, and the person who lives next to her bought the same cottage that she lives in, pays taxes that are 50 times hers. Now what is really needed in Cook County is that and in Illinois, is we have more appeals venues than any other place in America. We have 4 venues for appeals. And the more appeals that you have in a system and the more iterations of appeals that you have, the less fair the system gets. It's basically a textbook example of structural inequity, because who knows how to navigate the appeals system best? Probably the people with the most wealth and the people most access and most influence. To iterate that over and over again, you end up reducing the share of the burden that's borne by the most powerful and wealthy, and that burden in turn gets passed on to those who have least access to it. Another thing, sort of connected with all these appeals venues, is we really are kind of, it's a grotesque anomaly how many appeals that we have here in Cook County. Before I came into office, we had about 1/3 of all parcels appealing. In most parts of the country, appeals are a single-digit percentage of the parcels. Now, we've made really good progress on this. We have 3 straight years of declining appeals. They're down by about 1/3 from when we came in. Now, you always need to have some level of appeals to account for mistakes and inaccuracies and unfairness in the system, but the more you have of this, the system gets skewed. So we're trying to eliminate a lot of the distortions from that. We're making progress on it, but of course it takes time to change behaviors, to change expectations, and to bring through any kind of reform to the system. But those are some of the biggest differences here versus other parts of the country.
Thank you. Brian, you're up.
Yes, thank you. The question I had is this makes me think of like income tax, for like federal income tax, how they've talked for years, let's simplify it, let's make it like a flat tax. But then they talk about all the lobby groups, the CPAs, the lawyers, everybody that fights it, because there's millions of people that do tax work. With this situation, how have the real estate lawyers, the property tax lawyers, have they been very resistive? Have they been supportive? How has that kind of effort been? Because I imagine they have a big pull on how it's handled and lobbying throughout the state.
Great question. Like any group of people in God's kingdom, you have different kinds of people in every sector who have different interests and different opinions. But, as an industry, I think, it's pretty understandable that the more our system was broken, the more money the appeals industry made. And you can include in that lawyers, but also people who are not lawyers who operate as consultants. They have the same economic model. So the more inaccurate you are, the more you need to appeal, the more money they make. And the less dysfunctional the system is, the less money they make.
And as much as possible,
Yes,
which is why Florida and Tennessee are booming and Illinois sucks.
So I'm gonna answer his question, but I'll address yours. If you could just pass the microphone on to the person who asked the question. In Florida and Tennessee, you don't need to appeal like you do here. In those places, they have appeals that are much lower as a share of things. What is in your economic interest as an individual? If everyone acted that way, the system would be really expensive and inefficient to operate. So the key is to adopt the methods that we see in places that have more functional property tax systems so that the systems get it right the first time. So you don't have to appeal. Many of you might have come here or lived in places where like this is not a thing. You don't have people out there appealing every year as a matter of course and feeling like you have to do that.
Indiana, and they made it real simple: 1%, 2%, 3%.
Right. Well, the percentage rates, but it's the percentage on what, right?
Yes.
But there's a pretty objective reality in many kinds of asset classes as to how the market values them and what's their worth. And we think collecting data that everyone agrees on is a good start to making the system fair for everyone. And then showing your methods, being transparent about it, that's a good start. And you get to a better system. But you also mentioned something that I think is also relevant, the income tax system. One of the things that makes our property tax system so dysfunctional is that our state is more dependent on property taxes to finance its main use, which is educating our children, than any other state, almost any other state. We spend less as a state in supporting our school districts than any other part of the union. About 25% of school districts' funding comes from the state, from income taxes and other sources of revenues, versus other states. And that is why property taxes are high in Illinois. And people think as the assessor, I might like that. I don't. I think it's incredibly inefficient and regressive to finance education of our children through the property tax. And it's getting more regressive and unfair as our economy gets more digital. Think about how there are different parts of the economy that make our economy go. Yes, we have brick and mortar, but we also have service businesses. We have finance. We have technology. We have healthcare. Well, digital, finance, and healthcare, largely, they don't have brick and mortar that pays property tax. So they kind of get a pass on paying for the education of our children. And instead, anyone who owns brick and mortar shoulders that burden. As our economy gets more digital, we did this meeting on Zoom 2 years ago, instead of using a hotel ballroom or this place that we're in right now. Well, think about how the economy is doing that. It's reducing the demand for brick and mortar, doing things more digitally. So the digital part gets a pass from paying for the education of our children, and more burden is stacked onto bricks and mortar. That is inefficient. So that is another thing that needs reforming. And the way we do it is we finance our schools more from the state level and the federal level, using income taxes rather than property taxes, which are regressive. And I think income taxes are the best way to do it, because then you're not expressing a preference as to whether income's generated through brick and mortar or not. You're just taxing income, and the system's more equitable that way.
We've got a question in the back, and then after that, I'm going to go to Zoom for a bit, and we'll come back into the room.
Hi, thank you very much. That was very informative. I'm Jackie Boland. My question is, I think you said that the phone calls are being answered quicker. Does that mean you hired people for that, or how's that working?
Well, there's a bunch of different things that go into that. When we came into the office, we didn't have good call center software. We didn't know how many calls were being dropped. We didn't know how long it took for someone to wait to get a call. We put in call center technology so we could track those things, and then we made the technology accessible for people working from home virtually, so that now we have more, we can leverage more of our labor resources to answer calls even when people have openings in their schedule. So if someone's working from home, they can take calls. And so we do need more people. My goal is to significantly add to staffing so that we have more people able to take the calls and provide better service. We'll have quantitative targets for our second term on improvements. We have a lot of retirements happening from our office, and I think incrementally there are several different areas where we need to hire people, not only in commercial analysts but also in customer service. So we have made improvements largely through technology, but also through more attention to it. But we think we have a lot more to go. I'm not happy with the response times and drop rates that we have right now.
Okay. Is somebody from CAM, can they read off a question off the chat box?
Yep, Eric, actually, I'm going to do it. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we have a question from Robert Harney on the Zoom call. His question is, what is going to happen in 2024 when the pension step-up takes place?
Okay, so actually, are you referring, so there are different pension step-ups that we have to worry about. Is this from Illinois or Chicago? Because it's actually a pretty different story.
And you know what, let's see, Robert, if you want to unmute, you can go ahead and reply to the follow-up question.
I would say definitely both Chicago, Cook County, and Illinois, because it's all going to affect how we're going to have to pay taxes and how are we going to do it.
Sure. So I think, one of the things that has been a perennial problem in Chicago and Illinois has been the underfunding of our pension obligations. This has been something that was a problem at the state level in 1970 when we adopted our new Illinois Constitution, and ever since then. The interesting thing that I don't think people have appreciated is how far at least the city of Chicago has gotten on its pension climb. You mentioned that there's this pension climb. So Chicago's various different pension funds were very underfunded 10 years ago. But over the last decade, Chicago has done a lot to climb the pension ramp to the point where each year it's taking on all of the costs of funding pensions and keeping the funding levels steady in its pension funds. And to be specific, in a 9-inning game, Chicago's like in the bottom of the 8th in climbing its pension ramp. What does that mean? Chicago's just maybe $100 or $200 million a year short of the level where it is financing the annual cost of its pensions and keeping its pension funds stable. In Chicago, for a long time, there's been what I refer to as perma bears. So people who are permanently bearish on Chicago, like no matter what is good is happening in Chicago, like the universal bearish thing is to say, but what about pensions? Well, under Mayor Emanuel and under Mayor Lightfoot, they have dramatically stepped up the annual funding into the pension. So if you go and look at the presentation that the city just gave on its budget, and you'll see that the pension they climbed a big ramp over the last few years. And if you guys pay taxes in Chicago, you've seen it. Your property tax bills have gone up a lot because CPS and the city are levying more, and it's largely to pay for pensions. But the city is like in the bottom of the 8th inning in this. There is not much more ramp to climb. So where does that leave the city now? Its pensions are short of the 90% funding that you'd want to see, where pensions are pre-funded. But I think the more important thing to focus in on is if you're paying the annual cost of your pension and you're keeping funding levels stable so that its funded percentage is not dropping, that is where the city needs to be. And it's almost there. And I think when the casino comes online, the city will largely be done with it. And this is something to celebrate. We've all worked hard to get there as Chicagoans to get to this point. The state is still short, a couple $2 billion a year short And we have to figure out how the state finances that structural deficit. And this will be a big part of, decisions that are made in Illinois in the next decade.
All right, Shelby, let's take one more question from Zoom.
We don't have any more questions from Zoom, so you can go back to the audience.
All right, one more in the room. Chuck, do you still have a question?
Oh, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very, very well done, and you're an excellent speaker and very good. Obviously, you know your stuff. I'm in the real estate business. I've been selling real estate for over 30 years and throughout the Chicagoland area, commercial primarily. And my question revolves around the comment that you made about there's low bottom appraisals being done by property owners. And I have to beg to differ in that regard because many of my owners, when they get their assessed valuation, they kind of shrug their shoulders and say, if my property is worth this, county buy it from me.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's twice what the market is. And I know that for a fact because I've sold buildings. I've sold one recently in Worth, Illinois, an office building. But this is like level on the ground kind of conversation. An office building at 111th in Harlem in Worth, Illinois. It was a 3-story elevator office building. It went for $800,000. It was valued at over $1.5 million. It was a half-vacant building. What's an owner to do other than try to contest that real estate tax bill? In other tax bills that are contested, I have a question. What percentage of those actually get relief?
So there are a couple different pieces to this equation. First of all, there are 1.9 million properties in Cook County. We are about 230 people in our office. And each property is really different. It has a lot of its own characteristics. And sometimes the data that we have, it doesn't accurately reflect what's there. A lot of time we don't have enough qualitative information to say, is this an A-class office building or a C-class office building? And so we have worked really hard to make sure that we have good data underlying that. Like that we know in the market what a square foot of office space would rent for. We have a pretty good idea of what an income stream from office, what multiple the market pays for it. What sometimes we don't have is this an A class or C class? So we sought passage of the data modernization bill back in Springfield in 2019. What that would have done would mean that on an anonymized basis, properties would submit information about their rent and income and costs and building characteristics on an anonymized basis so that we'd be able to sort properties into different buckets and have really good data underlying them to do that. Now that passed out of the Senate by a bipartisan supermajority, came over to the House under Michael Madigan's leadership, and it didn't get a vote. We will be pushing on this bill again. We had a compromise bill that would have only required, it would have left out rents and occupancy and would have just had a one-time snapshot of building dimensions and quality without fines. And even then, big building owners blocked the passage of that bill. They basically took small commercial properties hostage to keep our system in the dark so that small property owner that you're talking about would have had to appeal when we would have had better data to get it right for that property owner the first time. That's what's at stake in this bill. So what have we done to get better data in absence of having this important legislation passed, which, by the way, reflects best practice in the rest of the country? We sent out to every commercial property owner a form where you can submit us information about rent, expense, and occupancy before we assess it. Your building owner would have had the opportunity to do that, but many property owners are not submitting it because they're not sort of used to thinking that the assessor wants to help get the better data right the first time. And unfortunately, lots of tax lawyers were getting in the way of property owners submitting that data to them, which would have saved them money. This is something I call the form that saves you money. It's called RPI, the Real Property and Income and Expense Form. Commercial property owners should fill it out because people who are smart about this have been. Brookfield, which is one of the biggest property owners in the world, They submitted the form about water tower, and it saved them more than $100 million in assessed value because they could show us how their rents and occupancy and valuations had been affected by market conditions better than the data that we had already. So that's what a small property owner like yours should do. We think we're getting better and better. As I mentioned at the start of the speech, our assessments in the north suburbs, the first year in office, were shown to be within industry standards for accuracy, equity, and uniformity. Doesn't mean we get it right for every person because we're talking about large numbers here. The north suburbs, hundreds of thousands of them, right? But this is why the appeals system exists. And you know, the news on declining appeals is good because it means frivolous appeals are no longer getting in the way of the appeals that need attention from us, so we can make better improvements and so there's a virtuous circle here. You have declining appeals, you have more attention to be put on the ones we're getting wrong, we can get better and better and serve those folks well. So we're right in the middle of that virtuous circle now.
Well, Mr. Assessor, thank you so much for spending your lunch with us today. Let's give him a round of applause. And I'm told I have a gift to give you. Is it under here? Oh, was I not supposed to be drinking out of this mug? Okay. We have a very small token of our appreciation today, but thank you so much for coming.
Check it out, everybody. Thank you.
You
really
bet.
appreciate
Thank you very
it.
much.
Hey, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you.
And with that, I actually need to leave a little bit early, so I am going to hand the meeting once again over to Sarah Buck, who's going to take us home. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Right here.
Okay, and I just want to echo the thank you to our speaker today. To continue your baseball analogy, you were not asked softball questions. And so you did a very nice job fielding those. And I think the mark of a good speaker are good engaging questions. And so thank you to our speaker, but also thank you to those here at the meeting as well. So we're going to take some time here to go through our guests. Do we have anyone, we'll do in the room first. Do we have any visiting international Rotarians in the room? I see someone pointing and someone shaking their head, so. Not international, okay, so no internationals. Any visiting US Rotarians who would like to stand perhaps and tell us where you're coming from? I think we've got a microphone for you, otherwise the Zoom people won't hear you.
Hello everybody, I'm John White.
Hang on one second, start over so the ones on Zoom can hear you. Yep.
John White. And a North Side Chicago boy, has a home in Sanibel Island, Florida, Sanibel Captiva, and been there since '99. I'm a Florida resident now for lots of reasons. I heard some wonderful things from Fritz about, you know, Cook County and the levy system, and I didn't ask any questions, but the portability in Florida is one thing. People not being evicted from their homes for not paying taxes. They can't afford it. The older people that just can't handle things. No income tax if you work in Florida. But then again, as our school system is good. I mean, consequences all over the place. But in any event, I'm here from the Sanibel Captiva Rotary. I've only been in it 3 years. I'm enjoying very much Rotary, learning a bunch of things. Think as a boy at Devon and Western, I lived in a cocoon. Never knew there were so many needy people out there right now. So it's just a wonderful organization. And my Rotary, we donated, if I may be a numbers person, $15,000 to the Ukrainian situation. And everybody agrees with that. I read some things that make me, I guess it goes back 1,000 years with the history. And not that I'm a historian. But in any event, Rotary is wonderful, and I'm very proud to be part of it. And I'm on their finance committee, which actually tomorrow morning at 6:30, because it's 6:30 Central Time here, Eastern Time. I have to They start at 7:30 there in the East. And then it's just a wonderful organization. Have I learned a bunch. And I just thought I'd come down to the Union League Club and visit with all you people and, nice smiling faces and lots of, in any event, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. Do we have any other in the room visiting U.S. Rotarians? Anyone looking down, not making eye contact with me? Okay, so I'm not hearing any more in the room. We have a couple of minutes, and I mean that quite literally. Do we have any visiting Rotarians on Zoom? Shelby, if you want to, are there any visitors that we have today?
Yep, I've asked them to unmute and introduce themselves.
Okay, so just unmute, tell us your name and where you're coming from. Not all at once. I don't have a participants list, so we just have to be bold.
Yeah, maybe I may start. My name is Hans-Joachim Dupré. I'm from the Rotary Club Hannover Leibniz in Germany, and I'm very happy to be with you tonight. And I know already a couple of guys from your club, Timo, Matthias Amberg, Cheryl, Marga. So I'm very happy to be here and to be in the future a couple of times more in your club meetings. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Next, is there anyone else?
I'm John Noblock from the Rotary Club of Naperville.
Perfect, just next door.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. All right, so let's move on to the rest of our program here to finish up. So just a couple of announcements. We have some volunteer opportunities coming up. One of them involves a Printers Row Literary Festival. So that is happening on September 10th and 11th. The Rotary Chicago Near South is inviting Rotary One to the Printers Row Lit Festival in Printers Row on September 10th or 11th. The Printers Row Literary Festival welcomes up to 100,000 fest goers over the weekend. At no cost to Rotary One, you can man the Rotary table or woman the Rotary table for a couple of hours and meet fest goers and pass out information about Rotary One and the many wonderful ways you support the local and international community. I did this a few years ago. You know what happened? I was asked to be co-chair of the Community Service Committee. So be careful where you sit. Okay, so next, Neetha is here in person. Would you like to come up here, or do you want to grab the microphone? You're on my, about the diversity committee? You want to just share about what's going on?
Right, so we just started that this year, the DEI committee for our club, and encouraging all members or anybody interested to join the club. We'll be having our first meeting next month in September. And basically what International has a DEI focus, and our district does as well. So we'll be working towards the same goals that the organization is. And really, it's about how we can leverage the diversity to make whatever we're doing even better, as our speaker has talked about too, how he's done that. So really looking for members that are interested in sharing your ideas. So please reach out to the office or let me know if you're interested. Thanks.
Good, thank you. So just another announcement here regarding Link Unlimited. On July 5th, 2022, the team from Link Unlimited Scholars, along with Marshall Schmidt, which is here, and Alita Williams, which is here, kicked off our pilot program to partner with Link to create a transformational mentor initiative within Rotary One that will build on our commitment to disadvantaged youth. Now we need mentors to make the program work. Our goal is to provide at least 10 mentors for the coming school year. A total of 8 people from Rotary One and Chicago Southeast have expressed interest. We'd like a few extra to ensure the program has a critical mass for success. So please, if you're interested in being a mentor with that program, you can contact Alita or Marshall or reach out to the office. We have a slide with our upcoming Rotary One meetings. We have I'm not sure if that one's next or the committee meetings one is next. So if you're interested, let's see what comes up. Okay, upcoming Rotary meetings. So you have here the dates and times and the speakers who are coming up in the next few weeks.
Sarah,
yes.
If you would, please. I obviously can't see that.
So on every Friday at noon, we have our roundtable here at the Union League Club, and you're welcome to come join with that. That's a sort of an informal fellowship, if you will. On Tuesday, August 23rd, we have Stevie Valles. Stevie Vallis from Chicago Votes. That is in person and on Zoom. Tuesday, August 30th, we have Paul Vallis, who's former CEO, is also a mayoral candidate. And then on Tuesday, September 6th, our Rotary After Work at 5:30 is the Rotary One's Young Entrepreneurs, and that is in person only at Michael Best. If you're interested in participating in a committee, you can look at the membership committee, which meets next on August 19th, the PR and marketing committee, which meets next on August 19th also, the community service committee, we're in August already, so yeah, September 1st will be our next meeting, and then the diversity committee and the international service committee meetings are still to be determined. So with that, we are almost late, so let's do the four-way test. So if we could rise, we will go through the four-way test. All right. So this is the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And with that, I thank you very much for being in here and participating today. Meeting adjourned.